everyone, it's Jack from Cultaholic.com, and before this show, I predicted that it would be one of those cards that it seems as though WWE has every year, not including the Saudi Arabia shows, which are a whole different kettle of fish, but there's usually one regular pay-per-view around this time of year. I think last year it was Backlash, that is just panned. Everyone goes, that was terrible, a disappointment from top to bottom, and I thought that this was going to be that. I'm delighted to report, actually, that I was wrong, and that, you know what, there were several good matches and several good moments on this show, and then we had a bit of a strange sort of main event thing going on. But apart from that, let's just take a look at everything that happened. So this is what happened at WWE Stomping Grounds 2019. I don't know if we call it the year, because WWE Stomping Grounds 2019. Let's start by talking about the one and only match on the Kickoff show, which was the triple threat for the Cruiserweight Championship, pitting the champion Tony Nese against challengers Drew Gulak and Akira Tozawa. Now, there were one or two clues during the entrances as to the story of this match. For example, Drew Gulak now has a new Titantron, which matches his new, more ruthless persona. He was also wearing just, plain black gear to really demonstrate that he's ditched all the PowerPoints and all the silly gimmickry, and he's now just a ruthless competitor. Whereas Tony Nese was very much Mr. 205 Live. He was representing the Cruiserweight division that he is champion of. He came out in purple. He was saying, I think he even said to the camera on his way down the ramp, we're going to steal the show before the show. This is going to be a great, he was basically saying this is going to be a great advert for what 205 Live and the Cruiserweight division is. And while this wasn't, the best Cruiserweight title match that I've seen on a pay-per-view, it was still pretty good. It was wrestled at a fast pace, it was intense, and it contained a lot of the high spots that you'd expect from a 205 Live match. Akira Tozawa, for example, was flying around like a madman, as he often does. He did like a running sort of flipping senton along the apron onto the ring steps and then flipping to the outside. That was pretty intense. He also did his signature high elevation back senton to break up the Gulak, which Gulak had locked on Tony Nese at one stage. The finish actually came when Nese was immobilized. He was taken out of the ring, leaving Tozawa and Gulak alone without the champion in consideration, and Gulak was able to pick up the victory over Akira Tozawa, picking up the Cruiserweight Championship for the first time in his career without even, pinning or submitting the champion. So I think that'll probably lead to a rematch somewhere down the line, but assuming that Gulak wins that and keeps a hold of the title, it'll be very interesting to see who his next challenger is. Now onto the main show, and the first match was for the Raw Women's Championship. It was Becky Lynch taking on her challenger, Lacey Evans. This wasn't the cleanest match on the show by any stretch of the imagination, but it wasn't bad. I don't think any of the wrestling on the show could be considered really bad, but this was a little bit sloppy here and there. There was a little bit of a botch in the corner at one stage from Lacey because Becky went to do a jumping back kick and Lacey just wasn't in position. Also, I don't know if this is just because Matthew pointed out to me this week or because I was just kind of paying more attention and it was more obvious this time around, but Becky was calling quite a lot of spots loudly in sort of John Cena fashion. I don't know again if that's just because it was pointed out to me earlier or if you noticed it too particularly on Stomping Grounds. Lacey was working the ribs, really grinding Becky down, and Becky did a good job of selling the ribs even when she was coming back at times. Her big comeback was a fun one as well. She took Lacey Evans' handkerchief, stuffed it in Lacey's mouth. It was kind of the reverse treatment to what Lacey usually does to her opponents, and then hit her with, I think it was an uppercut or something, and Lacey spat the handkerchief out as she was hit. It was all good fun stuff, and then we moved on to the finish, which was a bit of a surprisingly abrupt one in my opinion. So yes, the finish came when Becky managed to get the disarmer on, and within milliseconds, Lacey Evans was tapping out. It reminded me of when The Miz used to tap out to John Cena's STF. He'd tap out just immediately in seconds back in that feud. This was very similar, obviously meant to, make Becky look really strong, but I wonder if it risked making Lacey look a little bit cowardly at the same time. Next up, potentially, maybe on balance, my favorite match of the night. It was certainly a huge sleeper hit. The tag team match for no titles or anything between KO, Kevin Owens, and Sami Zayn, and two members of the New Day, Xavier Woods and Big E. This match had a really, really hot start with Kevin Owens super kicking Big E off the apron, and then both he and Sami Zayn just taking turns hitting big move after big move on Xavier Woods. Neither guy actually was able to hit their finisher, but they were hitting him with all their signatures and all their secondary finishes and that sort of thing. There was, Blue Thunder Bombs. Kevin Owens was just lighting him up with super kicks. It was really fun. It was a really fun and fast-paced and different opening. But Woods kept kicking out of everything, just, getting his shoulder up at the last second, and eventually, after a prolonged beatdown from the heels, which never dragged and was never boring, by the way, he managed to get the hot tag to Big E. Now, Big E had spent so much time either on the apron or lying on the outside that I actually thought he might still be a little bit injured coming into this match. That turned out not to be the case, because this was a really hot hot tag, if that makes sense. Big E was flying around, taking out KO, taking out Sami Zayn. He did obviously his terrifying spot that he loves to do, the spear onto his opponent on the apron, and they both just tumbled to the outside. But it was really enthralling all the way through, and the action never really let up. Eventually though, Owens was able to isolate Woods once again and did pick up the big victory. Woods was on the top rope, Owens hit the ropes and Woods like crotched himself on the top turnbuckle, and then that led to a stunner from KO, which led to the pinfall victory. A much needed victory, I think I should add, for Owens and Zayn, who were kind of treated a little bit like mugs in the build-up to this one. But I'm glad they won, and I'm glad that the match was such a fun one. You could tell that all four guys were coming out here to really steal the show, and they kind of knew that they were going to as well, especially when there was like not a double down spot, but like a quadruple down spot with all four guys just lying on the canvas, giving the crowd a chance to really show their appreciation. This was really fun from top to bottom, and yeah, as I said, on balance, may have been my favourite match of the night. Next up, another contender for match of the night, in my opinion, Ricochet versus the US champion, Samoa Joe. I did have to feel sorry for Ricochet during his entrance, because when he did his signature, handspring onto the ropes into a backflip pose, he did slip and just kind of fall on his face. I think it's the only time I think I've ever seen him do that. Luckily, when he got on the top turnbuckle, he remembered that he was Ricochet and just did a big old backflip instead. Just to remind everyone, that was a fluke. I'm actually an incredible athlete, so don't even worry about it. I don't know if this was quite as good a match as the previous one. Maybe I'm just being a little bit too harsh because it did follow that previous match, and that was really unexpectedly really exciting and fast-paced all the way through. This match was still good, but it was more about a clash of styles, with Joe constantly trying to keep the action grounded, constantly trying to slow the pace, and Ricochet always trying to take to the skies and pick up the pace and that sort of thing. The crowd seemed appreciative of it though. The crowd, I must mention actually, it's a good time to do so, were pretty hot throughout this show. They did dip at parts, and there were certain lulls, as there will be for any, multi-hour pay-per-view. But at the same time, they were pretty intense all the way through. They were a little bit smarky, as we'll come to see in just a second, but I thought they added to the atmosphere of what could otherwise have been a pretty flat card. The finish came when Joe hit Ricochet with either a big clothesline or a lariat. I'm not sure which one it was. Ricochet did like the classic Rikishi bump, like the inside out bump, but landed on his feet instead of like hitting the canvas. This led to him maintaining the upper hand. I think he hit the code breaker or whatever he calls it, and then taking to the air and hitting the big 630 on Samoa Joe, and now Ricochet is the new United States champion. After the match, we got a nice cool little bit backstage actually in Gorilla, where Ricochet was congratulated by a host of baby faces, and Charlotte for some reason. Don't know what that was about, but okay. And also Heavy Machinery, who had the match next. Otis grabbed Ricochet and went like, "I love you, Ricky." It was funnier than I've just done it there. Much, much funnier actually, I must add. Otis is a far funnier man than I. And after that whole congratulations kind of scene, Triple H was even there and gave Ricochet a big handshake, and it was really cool to see, like the head of NXT congratulating one of his biggest call-ups, I suppose. Then later on, it happened later on in the night, but I'll mention it now because it's relevant. Ricochet was getting his promo shots done with the title for the website and everything, and the club came over and they were like, "Oh yeah, let's pose with the champ. Too sweet, throw it up." And Ricochet was like, "No." It was probably just because they're heels, or like smarmy, I guess, in a way. They're kind of tweenerish, aren't they, the club at the moment? But I like to think that it was actually because he remembers his history in New Japan where he was a babyface, so obviously he must hate the Bullet Club. I want that to be true. I want that so badly. But that wasn't the main point of this segment. The main point was when AJ Styles ended the scene and basically said, "Oh, well done, Ricochet, man. Too sweet, bro. I'll see you tomorrow night." And I was like, oh, I want all the Ricochet AJ matches. Give them a best of 7 series. Give them a best of 1,000,000 series. I don't care. But next up, as I mentioned, it was Heavy Machinery. They had a match against the SmackDown Tag Team Champions, Daniel Bryan and Rowan. It was actually hard to focus on the story of this match. In fact, the story of this match really became how over Daniel Bryan was with the crowd. I know he's a heel, but he was getting cheered like an all-conquering hero because the show, of course, took place in Tacoma, Washington, and Daniel Bryan is a Washington boy. And it wasn't just that they were cheering the heel in Daniel Bryan, they were booing Heavy Machinery as well. I think they even booed Otis's worm. It was brutal, but I thought I liked it. I liked the fact that commentary didn't try and brush over the fact that Daniel Bryan was so popular there because it was his home state. They in fact described Washington as like the last stand of the Yes movement or something similar to that, which I thought was really cool. I prefer it when they do this, when they don't pretend that the hometown hero isn't popular just because they're a heel. I much prefer this honesty, and I thought in a curious way it actually added to the match and gave it a little bit of a unique atmosphere. Didn't really help Heavy Machinery much, but they'll get more chances. Maybe. It was a pretty enjoyable match, and I was actually really impressed with Tucker of Heavy Machinery. I was slightly more familiar with Otis because he's like the standout member of the team or the more over member of the team. But I didn't realize that Tucker, for a man of his size, was quite so athletic. That factored into the finish. Daniel Bryan blind tagged in. The babyfaces didn't realize it and tried to, defeat Rowan. They tried to hit him with their double team finisher, but Bryan was the legal man. Rowan then got knocked to the outside and Tucker hit him with a big splash from the top to the outside, which was pretty impressive. Then Tucker rolled back in and it looked as though he was going to finish off Bryan, but he got caught in a small package and the tag team champions retained their titles. To the delight, by the way, of course, of the Washington crowd. Next up, we had Bayley, the SmackDown Women's Champion, versus Alexa Bliss, with, of course, Nikki Cross in her corner. The story being that Alexa's been manipulating the situation, trying to turn Nikki against Bayley and saying stuff like, oh, she's been a dick about you effectively, and she's done mean things on social media. She refused to take pictures with fans, and I think we're meant to be like, nah, she's lying about Bayley. But the crowd were pretty split on this one because they're kind of smarky, and Alexa Bliss kind of popular with No, I've got to tell the truth. The crowd they were doing Let's Go Bayley, Let's Go Alexa, and the Let's Go Alexa chants were of a far lower pitch, shall we say, than the Let's Go Bayley chants. This was the most, I guess, standard feeling match of the show so far, if that makes any sense. It just felt like a TV match, but slightly elongated, I suppose. But at the same time, that's not necessarily a criticism. It was still pretty enjoyable, if, I guess, more for the storyline than the actual action in the ring. All the storyline kind of stuff really kicked off when Bayley hit a suicide dive, or a low pay, as the cool indie kids call it, through the bottom and middle ropes, and Alexa just left Nikki to take the brunt of it on the outside. In fact, all of it. Alexa got completely out of the way. And then later on, Bliss had the upper hand and was setting up for the Sparkle Splash, or Twisted Bliss, the Sparkle Splash. I'm just so NXT. For the Twisted Bliss. But then Nikki got back in the ring because she was furious about Bayley hitting her with the dive from earlier. I thought this was going to lead to Nikki kind of accidentally costing Alexa and then Alexa turning on Nikki, but that's not quite what happened. I mean, it did distract Alexa, preventing her from hitting Twisted Bliss at that moment, but she got another chance later on, and then Bayley got the knees up, and that led to the Bayley to belly, and then Bayley retained her SmackDown Women's Championship. But the aftermath was not how I expected it to go at all. Nikki got in the ring to check on Alexa, which led to Bayley kind of shoving her away and going like, what were you doing getting involved in my match? And I thought Bayley, as a pure babyface, would have been more just delighted to have retained her title, but instead she was kind of annoyed at Nikki's involvement, which I guess she had a right to be. And Alexa didn't blame Nikki at all. They were consoling each other in the ring, looking really broken down about this whole thing. I don't know if this is just me, but was anyone else getting the sort of first inklings of a double turn angle? I don't know if that's just me, but it was a bit of a strange way to go. Next up, we had Roman Reigns versus Drew McIntyre. Drew, of course, having Shane McMahon in his corner. The best in the world, Shane McMahon. Shane did get involved quite a lot in this match, but that didn't take away too much from the quality, actually. This was a better match than I thought it was going to be, and I'd even say it was probably better than their WrestleMania match, which is weird because that match didn't even involve Shane, so you'd think this one would be a bit worse because of him getting involved all the time. But instead, I think it probably was, on balance, a more interesting bout. Things kicked off with a hot start, Drew marching down to the ramp and meeting Roman halfway through his entrance, and they just started exchanging punches. But then Roman got distracted by Shane and chased him around the crowd, and then when Roman tried to get back over the guardrail, Drew was there to just lay him out with a big right hand to the face. This kind of set the tone for the match, with Shane involving himself whenever the referee's back was turned, and then occasionally Roman getting distracted by Shane and going after him rather than his opponent. The most clear example of this was when he had Drew set up for the Superman punch, but then Shane got on the apron and Roman just took him out instead, and this led to Drew regaining control of the match. There were periods of this match where it felt a little bit slow-paced and the crowd kind of fell into a bit of a lull, but at the same time there were some moments of really high drama as well, which I thought was pretty good. At one point, right, I hope the referee's okay. So basically, Roman had Drew beat, he hit him with the spear, covered him, 1, 2, and then Shane was meant to grab the referee and drag him out, but he left it slightly too late. I think he was trying to show off. Not too late in that it ruined the spot, but too late in that he had to really scramble to get there. And when he grabbed the referee and yanked him, it's almost as if he did so slightly too hard because he was panicking because he was kind of almost late to the spot. And this led to the referee, I think, legitimately twisting or blowing out his knee, which Michael Cole actually pointed out on commentary. With the referee down on the outside, Shane got in the ring and blasted Roman with the coast to coast, which led to a really good near fall actually for Drew once the referee had recovered and got back in the ring. And you could really see at this point actually that the referee, I think, was legitimately hurt rather than selling. But in the end, it was a big babyface victory with Roman Reigns getting back into the match, dispatching Shane, throwing him over the top rope, and hitting Drew with a second spear for the victory. Yeah, this was decent, to be honest. It was more interesting than I thought it would be, because I thought we were in for a night of frustration given Shane's constant tendency to get involved in these matches. We've seen similar sort of matches on TV that have gone down a frustrating path, but this one I think was saved by a pretty good performance from both Drew and Roman. And Shane's stuff was good. I just hope that the referee's okay, because he did look like he actually twisted his knee there. Next up, we had another match actually that was a mixture of slow periods and more high intense big set piece moments. So the crowd were all over the place in this match, up and down, not knowing whether to pop or fall asleep. I think on the whole it was a good match, but the problem I don't think was with the performance of the guys in the ring themselves, more about the build up or lack thereof. I'm talking, of course, about the steel cage match for the WWE Championship, Kofi Kingston versus Dolph Ziggler. The reason that I'm criticising the build-up to this one is because of a strange turn of events that led to Dolph kind of being crudely shoehorned into this feud, and despite his best efforts, people haven't really got behind it. The reason for that, if you're not aware, is because Kofi's opponent after WrestleMania was reportedly supposed to be a rematch with Bryan, but then Bryan got injured. Then it was supposed to be Kevin Owens, who they turned heel quickly to sort of fill the gap, but Owens refused to go to Saudi Arabia, so it reportedly, once again, which instead meant that they had to find someone new, and that person was Dolph Ziggler. But yes, as I say, even though the foundation of a good storyline wasn't there, the intensity certainly was, with both guys talking a lot of trash to each other or scrambling like opportunistically to try and get over the top when the other one had slingshotted them into the cage wall. It made both guys look really desperate, not only to win, but to prove that they were better than their opponent. There were one or two big impressive spots as well, such as Kofi getting to the top and instead of choosing to escape or try to, instead like launching himself down off the side of the cage onto the ropes and then into kind of a twisting, dropping crossbody. It was very impressive. They also did some of the classic suspenseful battling atop the cage. When I checked my notes just before this bit of the video, I noticed that I'd typed battling atop the cafe, which would have been a very different turn of events, to be honest. But no, they battled atop the cage, and Ziggler almost at one point looked like he was going to fall down to the outside in Shane McMahon fashion, but instead Kofi managed to get him back over to the correct side of the fence. Things really picked up when Kofi got caught in a knee bar from Dolph and struggled to make the ropes, and then he grabbed the ropes, and then the referee went, "There are no rope breaks in a steel cage match." So just take that, Shane and Miz. Look what you've done. At least now we've got a precedent set, and if that ever happens again, we can complain about it and we can cite Stomping Grounds 2019. Kofi then crawls up the side of the cage, like even though Dolph still got the knee bar applied, or was it an ankle lock by this point? I can't quite remember. It was a leg-based submission. Kofi managed to get out of it by climbing up the side of the wall and kicking him off. So Ziggler just blasted him with a super kick, and in a great little moment, Kofi was knocked out and almost fell out of the cage door, and Ziggler had to scramble and catch his leg on the way down. That was really cool, actually. I don't think it would have been cool if that had led to Kofi winning, because he would have looked lucky, but because he didn't, it was just a nice suspenseful moment of the match. Ziggler then kept going for the cage door and kept going for it, which led to Kofi scrambling at several points. Nice suspenseful moments with Kofi just catching Ziggler's foot on his way out the door. And then it looked as though Dolph had the match won, because he was crawling for the exit with Kofi miles away across the ring, and then Kofi got a burst of energy and just dived over the top of him through the ropes, through the cage door, and sort of face planted on the outside. But it was a good, unique finish, and I think it's one that I've not seen in a cage match before, certainly not executed that well. Kofi got a post-match promo on the ramp where he was basically putting over Dolph Ziggler, but at the same time saying, "But I'm still the WWE champion." Standard babyface promo. The New Day were out and celebrated with him, and that made me think, oh, is Lesnar going to cash in right now? He didn't, so then I thought, oh, because we've had this big happy ending to this feud, are we going to see Lesnar cash in on Seth Rollins in the next match? And that was the last match on the show, of course, Seth Rollins versus Baron Corbin for the Universal Championship, with Corbin's choice of special guest referee. There'd been a lot of rumours in the build-up, a lot of speculation that it was going to be maybe Heyman, maybe Brock Lesnar himself, Mr. Money in the Bank, but in the end, it was Lacey Evans. The reason for this was because Seth had been taking out anybody who Baron had considered for the role on Raw and in the build-up to this match. So Baron chose, a woman who Seth would feel uncomfortable beating up, I guess, was the implication there. Not that he didn't look like he was going to come close to hitting her at several opportunities, because she was being a dastardly heel, she was. This match, I guess, was more of an elongated angle than an actual wrestling match. It was kind of 70-30. 65-35. 70-30. So once Lacey was announced, Corbin just jumped Seth before the bell, beat him down with Seth's own steel chair, and Lacey delayed the ringing of the bell, of course, while Corbin got the advantage. Then she did ring the bell, and we had a long beatdown. This beatdown was so long that the crowd sadly amused themselves by chanting boring, this is stupid, AEW, and of course Daniel Bryan as well, because, you know, they love Daniel Bryan, which I guess makes sense. Seth was able to make a comeback, but whenever he went for a pinfall, Lacey would count slow, or pretend that she'd thrown her arm out, or just forget to count. And the one where she pretended she like pulled her shoulder was really, really good, because Corey on commentary blamed Becky Lynch because she put the disarmer on her earlier in the night, which I thought was an excellent heel line, and almost like Bobby Heenan levels. It was very witty, and I did enjoy it. But I can't decide if I enjoyed the match as a whole. I don't think I enjoyed it as a wrestling match because there was too much surrounding it. But it was okay. I don't think it was as bad as the crowd made out. I just felt like it was a long build-up to a kind of predictable and okay payoff towards the end. So eventually Seth just got way too frustrated with Lacey because she did things like, oh, he powerbombed Corbin through the announce table on the outside, and she just stopped the count and said, this match is now no count outs. And I don't think referees actually have the power to do that. Then Corbin was beating down Seth with a steel chair, and she went, oh, it's no DQ. And then eventually Corbin hit the end of days. It looked like he had the match won, but because Lacey had made it no DQ, out came Becky Lynch and attacked Lacey Evans, taking her to the outside, hitting her with the Bexploder, and basically it was a normal match again, a no DQ one, but with a normal referee. I think it was John Cone, Nicholas's dad. I should point out as well that Lacey wasn't just being like a passive heel. She actually physically attacked Seth Rollins as well. She slapped him at one point. She gave him a low blow when Corbin was trying to get the upper hand. So it wasn't just, I don't think it was just the end of days that brought Becky out, or the no DQ rule. I think it was the fact that Lacey had actually physically attacked her boyfriend. And by the way, did you know that Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch are going out? Because they mentioned it they made it so clear on commentary that it almost reminded me of the whole Family Guy, oh, Jefferson High is our rival. But once Becky had evened the odds and hit the Bexploder, Seth was able to get Corbin on his own in the ring, hit the curb stomp and win the match and retain his title with a stomp at Stomping Grounds, hey! And then there was just kind of a nice scene at the end, which was tinged with a bit of WWE really ramming this relationship down our throats, as Seth and Becky hugged each other and raised each other's hands for what felt like ages, like a long time. It was meant to be a nice babyface moment, but once again, since they went public with their relationship, WWE have been like, look, they're boyfriend and girlfriend, pay attention to that. I was waiting for Brock Lesnar to come out and just destroy this happy scene and crash it completely, but that never happened. We got a happy ending. Seth and Becky are, you know, totally in love, and we've helped each other win the, which is fine. You know what? I'm relieved that Baron Corbin didn't win and that Seth Rollins is still Universal Champion. So that's it. That's what happened at WWE Stomping Grounds. I think, as I say, on the whole, it was a better show than expected. There were quite a lot of good matches. Once again, that main event probably won't go over too well, but I don't think it was as offensive as it could have been. We've certainly seen worse angles this year on pay-per-view. Yeah, fair enough, WWE. I now have renewed optimism as we head into SummerSlam, but there's no telling. I mean, everything can change in just a few weeks. We might get another wildcard type rule. Who bloody knows? Thanks very much for watching, and let us know what you think in the comments section down below. You can follow Cultaholic on Twitter at Cultaholic and on Facebook at facebook.com/Cultaholic. If you enjoy what we do, then please do check out our Patreon, patreon.com/Cultaholic, where you can pledge. And don't forget, of course, most importantly of all, to hit subscribe and to join us.